The morning sun cast long shadows across Nellie's Air Force Base as Captain Kestrel Ghost, Varga stepped out of the briefing room, her flight suit pristine despite the skeptical glances following her every move. The other pilots whispered behind cupped hands, their voices carrying just enough to sting. Female trainee, they called her, as if her gender somehow negated the distinguished flying cross pinned to her chest or the 3 combat deployments etched into her service record. What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly understand, was that Ghost carried secrets darker than the Nevada desert night, mysteries that would soon transform their mockery into something approaching reverence. The briefing had been routine until Colonel Marcus Titan Rodriguez announced the day's exercise, a simulated strike mission against a heavily defended target, with Ghost assigned as wingman to Lieutenant Colonel James Viper Harrison, the squadron's golden boy. Harrison's reputation preceded him like jet wash, 200 combat hours, a silver star, and an ego that could fill a hangar. He turned to Ghost with a patronizing smile that made her jaw clench. "Try to keep up, trainee. This isn't flight school anymore." Ghost's pale green eyes, the color of Arctic ice that earned her the call sign, remained steady as she nodded once. "Copy that, sir." Her voice carried no emotion, but those who knew her well would have recognized the dangerous calm that preceded her most devastating performances. She had learned long ago that respect wasn't given, it was taken, one perfect maneuver at a time. The mystery began 3 hours later when the exercise took an unexpected turn. What should have been a standard training mission became something else entirely when an encrypted message crackled through Ghost's headset. "Phantom 7, this is Overwatch. Real-world tasking. Authentication Tango 77 Whiskey." The blood drained from her face as she recognized the code, one that hadn't been used since her black operations days, when she flew missions that officially never happened for commanders whose names appeared on no roster. As the other pilots continued their mock engagement, oblivious to the shift in reality, Ghost found herself caught between 2 worlds. The training exercise where she was dismissed as just another female pilot trying to prove herself, and the shadow realm of classified operations where she had once been known by a different name entirely. The radio crackled again, and this time, Colonel Rodriguez's voice carried an undertone of urgency that made her blood run cold. "Ghost, we need to talk. Immediately." The morning that had started with routine mockery was about to become something none of them were prepared for, and Ghost knew that by sunset, everything would change. The command post hummed with tension as Ghost entered, her boots clicking against polished concrete. Colonel Rodriguez stood with his back to her, studying a wall-mounted display showing global threat assessments. Red zones pulsed across continents like infected wounds, but it was the black section marked "Classified Beyond Top Secret" that held his attention. When he turned, Ghost saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected, recognition tinged with what might have been fear. "Close the door, Captain." His voice carried weight that went beyond rank. Ghost complied, nodding how the automatic locks engaged with a soft hiss. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a containment. "Tell me, how long has it been since Operation Nightfall?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Nightfall had been buried so deep that even she sometimes convinced herself it had been a dream. 18 months, 4 days, sir." The precision of her answer revealed more than she intended. Rodriguez nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. Behind him, the classified section of the display flickered, resolving into satellite imagery of a facility that officially didn't exist. Ghost felt her pulse quicken as she recognized the angular structures and defensive positions of Compound 7, a place she'd hoped never to see again. "They've gone dark," Rodriguez continued, his fingers drumming against the metal desk. 47 personnel, including the research team. Last communication was 36 hours ago. He paused, letting the implication sink in. "The thing is, Captain, this facility has security protocols that make Fort Knox look like a convenience store. There are only 3 people alive who know the access codes, the defensive positions, and the exact location of the primary objective." His eyes locked onto hers with laser intensity. You're one of them. Ghost's mind raced through the possibilities, each one worse than the last. Compound 7 housed projects that violated several international treaties and at least half the Geneva Convention. If it had been compromised, if the research had fallen into hostile hands, the ramifications would ripple across continents. Sir, with respect, my security clearance for that operation was revoked upon mission completion. I'm not supposed to know. What you're not supposed to know could fill a library, Rodriguez interrupted. But what you do know might be the only thing standing between us and a catastrophe that makes 9/11 look like a fender bender. He moved to the display, highlighting a section of the facility's eastern perimeter. We've got satellite imagery showing foreign military vehicles in the vicinity. 3 different intelligence agencies are screaming for updates, and the Joint Chiefs are asking questions I can't answer. The weight of old secrets pressed down on Ghost like G-forces during a high-speed turn. She had left that world behind, traded the shadows for the relative clarity of conventional military service. But shadows had a way of reaching forward, dragging you back when you least expected it. Outside the briefing room, the sound of jet engines spooling up for afternoon training flights provided a stark contrast to the gravity of their conversation. Soon, those same pilots who dismissed her as a female trainee would learn that Ghost carried clearances that outranked most generals and had completed missions that would never appear in any official record. The question wasn't whether she was qualified. It was whether she was prepared to dive back into the darkness she'd fought so hard to escape. The Tactical Operations Center buzzed with controlled chaos as Ghost entered alongside Colonel Rodriguez. Banks of monitors displayed everything from weather patterns to satellite feeds, while communications specialists monitored frequencies across the spectrum. At the center of it all stood a figure that made Ghost's breath catch in her throat. Brigadier General Patricia, Iron Lady, Castellanos, a legend whose reputation had been forged in conflicts that were still classified decades after their conclusion. Castellanos turned as they approached, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow looked more intimidating than relaxed. "Captain Varga, I've been reading your file." She held up a folder thick enough to be mistaken for a phone book. The official version makes for interesting reading. Combat deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, numerous commendations, exemplary flight records. She set the folder down with deliberate care. The unofficial version, however, tells a different story entirely. Ghost maintained her military bearing despite the churning in her stomach. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're referring to." Castellanos raised a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Captain, I've been in this business since before you were born. I know the difference between a conventional pilot and someone who's seen the elephant in rooms that don't exist." She gestured to the main display, where real-time satellite imagery showed Compound 7 from multiple angles. "What I need to know is whether you're prepared to see it again." The facility looked exactly as Ghost remembered it, a collection of reinforced structures built into a natural canyon, designed to be invisible from above and impregnable from the ground. But something was wrong with the picture. The defensive positions that should have been manned were empty, and the electromagnetic signature that typically shrouded the facility in electronic camouflage was absent. "General, the passive defense grid is offline. That should be impossible unless—" She trailed off as the implications hit her. "Unless someone with intimate knowledge of the system deliberately shut it down," Castellanos finished. "Which brings us to our current problem. We have 47 missing personnel, including Dr. Marcus Webb, the lead researcher on Project Lazarus." Ghost's blood ran cold at the mention of Webb's name. She remembered him as a brilliant but unstable scientist whose work pushed the boundaries of what was ethically acceptable even in the shadowy world of black projects. The general moved to a secure terminal and entered a series of codes. The display shifted to show personnel files, each one marked with the same ominous red stamp, "Status unknown." "Captain, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Based on your knowledge of Compound 7 security protocols and the personalities involved, What's your assessment of the situation? Ghost studied the images for a long moment, her mind cataloging details that others might miss. The positioning of the abandoned vehicles, the open blast doors that should have been sealed, the absence of any signs of struggle. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of hard-earned experience. General, this wasn't an external breach. Someone opened the doors from the inside, and they knew exactly what they were doing. The silence that followed was broken only by the steady hum of electronic equipment, but Ghost could feel the weight of unspoken implications settling over the room like a shroud. The secure conference room fell silent as Ghost's assessment sank in. General Castellanos leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled as she processed the implications. Colonel Rodriguez cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Captain, if you're correct about this being an inside job, then we're looking at a betrayal at the highest levels. Someone with alpha-level clearance and intimate facility knowledge. Ghost nodded grimly, her mind already working through the possibilities. There were only 7 people with that level of access during my time there. Dr. Webb, Colonel Morrison who commanded security myself, and 4 others whose names I can't mention without additional clearance. She paused, remembering faces from briefings that had taken place in rooms without windows. If this is internal, we need to consider that whoever orchestrated it has been planning for months, maybe years. Castellanos activated another display, showing intercepts from various intelligence agencies. NSA picked up chatter 12 hours ago, references to the package and delivery window. CIA has assets in the region reporting unusual military movements from 3 different nations. She highlighted several locations on a world map. Captain, given your operational history, I'm prepared to offer you a choice that shouldn't exist. The general's words hung in the air like the moment before an aircraft stalls, when everything seems suspended between flight and catastrophe. Ghost had been here before, standing at the crossroads between her official identity and the shadow warrior she'd once been. Ma'am, what exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to disappear, Castellanos replied without hesitation. Officially, you'll be listed as participating in a classified training exercise. Unofficially, you'll be leading a small team into Compound 7 to determine what happened and, if necessary, prevent whatever's been taken from reaching hostile hands. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into Ghost's. This isn't a request, Captain. This is me telling you that your country needs the pilot who flew Nightfall, not the one who's been playing nice with the boys in the training squadron. Ghost felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a flight harness. Outside, she could hear the afternoon training flights returning to base, their engines winding down as pilots who knew nothing of black operations secured their aircraft and headed to the club for beers and war stories. It was a simple world, one where the enemy wore uniforms and the rules of engagement were clear. She was being asked to leave that world behind and step back into the shadows where right and wrong blurred into shades of gray. What's the timeline, General? Ghost asked, already knowing she would accept. Some calls couldn't be ignored, no matter how much you wanted to pretend you'd never heard them. Castellanos smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Wheels up in 6 hours. Your team is already being assembled, people who know how to keep secrets and how to operate in places that don't exist. As Ghost left the conference room, she caught her reflection in the polished metal door and saw someone she'd hoped never to be again. A ghost preparing to haunt the darkness. The equipment bay resembled a high-tech armory more than any standard military supply room. Ghost ran her hands over gear she hadn't touched in over a year. Night vision systems that could penetrate the darkest shadows. Communications equipment designed to operate in electronically hostile environments. And weapons that bore no manufacturer's markings. Each piece of equipment brought back memories she'd worked hard to suppress. Moments when the line between protector and predator had blurred beyond recognition. Brings back memories, doesn't it? The voice belonged to Master Sergeant Elena Wraith Kozlov, a woman whose reputation in special operations circles was whispered rather than spoken aloud. She emerged from behind a rack of specialized body armor, her movements silent despite the concrete floor. Ghost had worked with Kozlov twice before, both times on missions that officially never happened. "Alina, I should have known they'd bring you out of retirement for this." Ghost's greeting carried the weight of shared experiences that couldn't be discussed even in secure facilities. Kozlov had been part of the original Nightfall team, one of the few who understood the true cost of operating in the shadows. Who else did they pull from the dark? Kozlov gestured toward the far end of the bay, where two other figures were conducting equipment checks. "Mitchell's here, still the best combat engineer in the business, and they brought in Santos for communications and electronic warfare." She lowered her voice. "What they haven't told you is that this isn't just a reconnaissance mission. Intelligence suggests that whatever was taken from Compound 7 is being moved tonight. We might have one shot to intercept." The revelation hit Ghost like turbulence at altitude. A simple recovery mission had just become something far more complex and dangerous. "Alina, if they're already moving the package, that means they've had time to analyze what they took, depending on what Webb was working on." She left the sentence unfinished, but both women understood the implications. Santos approached them, his weathered face showing the strain of too many missions in places that tested the limits of human endurance. "Ghost, good to see you again, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He handed her a modified headset that looked like standard aviation equipment, but housed electronics worth more than most people's homes. "We've got intel suggesting the package is being transported via convoy to a coastal facility. 3 vehicles, heavy security, moving at 200 hours local time." Ghost accepted the headset, feeling its familiar weight. "What's our insertion method?" She already suspected the answer and didn't like where her thoughts were leading. Mitchell joined the group, his expression grim. "That's where things get interesting. The convoy route passes through a narrow canyon approximately 40 miles from the coast. It's the only viable intercept point, but it's also a natural killing ground if things go sideways." The team leader in Ghost began asserting itself, pushing aside the pilot who'd been content to fly training missions and deal with squadron politics. "What's our extraction plan if the mission goes sideways?" The question was met with exchanged glances that told her everything she needed to know. This was a one-way mission until proven otherwise, the kind of operation where success was measured not in medals or commendations, but in threats that never materialized and catastrophes that never happened. As they completed their equipment checks, Ghost caught sight of her reflection in a darkened monitor. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the female trainee who'd endured mockery that morning. This was someone who'd operated in the spaces between official policy and necessary action, who'd made decisions that kept others awake at night so that the rest of the world could sleep peacefully. In 6 hours, she would once again become that person, and she wasn't sure if that prospect terrified or relieved her. The flight line at 2300 hours was a different world from the bustling daylight operations. Ghost stood beside an aircraft that didn't appear on any inventory sheet, a modified stealth transport that bore no national markings or identification numbers. Its angular surfaces seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making the craft appear as much shadow as substance. This was technology that existed in the margins of official acknowledgement, designed by engineers whose names appeared in no public records. Captain Alex Phoenix Reeves, the aircraft's pilot, completed his pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision of someone who understood that mechanical failure wasn't just inconvenient, it was potentially catastrophic. Phoenix had flown missions that pushed the boundaries of what was aerodynamically possible, often returning with aircraft damage that raised questions he wasn't authorized to answer. "Ghost, we've got a 3-hour flight to the insertion point. Weather's going to be challenging. Low-level flight through mountain passes in conditions that would ground conventional aircraft." Ghost nodded, studying the mission parameters on her tablet. The route would take them through airspace that multiple nations claimed but none officially controlled, following terrain features that provided natural radar shadows. It was the kind of flying that required instincts honed by experience rather than textbook knowledge. What's our contingency if we encounter unexpected air traffic? We don't, Phoenix replied with the confidence of someone who'd never been detected when detection meant failure. This bird has stealth capabilities that make B-2s look like crop dusters, but that technology comes with limitations. We can't maintain radio contact once we're in stealth mode, and our window for extraction is exactly 47 minutes after insertion. The team gathered for final briefings in the aircraft's cargo compartment, a space designed for functionality rather than comfort. Kozlov spread tactical maps across a folding table while Santos calibrated communication equipment that would allow them to maintain contact across multiple frequencies. Mitchell reviewed explosive charges and breaching equipment with the care of someone who understood that precision was the difference between mission success and team casualties. General Castellanos appeared at the aircraft's ramp, her presence lending gravity to an operation that already carried the weight of national security implications. Final intelligence update, she announced, holding a sealed envelope. Satellite imagery from 30 minutes ago confirms the convoy is on schedule. 3 vehicles, estimated 12 to 15 personnel, moving along the predicted route. She paused, meeting each team member's eyes. What the imagery also shows is that they're not alone. We've identified at least 2 other groups converging on the same general area, possibly competing interests trying to intercept the same package. Ghost felt the familiar tightening in her chest that preceded complex operations. Multiple unknown players, compressed timelines, and objectives that could shift without warning. These were the elements that transformed straightforward missions into the kind of operations that haunted veterans' dreams. General, do we have any intelligence on the competing groups, equipment, capabilities, intentions? Castellanos shook her head. Minimal intelligence, but what we have suggests at least one group has military-grade equipment and training. This isn't going to be a simple intercept. You're walking into a potential 3-way engagement in terrain that favors whoever gets there first. She handed Ghost the sealed envelope. Your final authority codes and emergency protocols. Use them only if the situation becomes untenable. As the general departed and the aircraft's engines began their startup sequence, Ghost felt the weight of command settling over her shoulders. In less than 3 hours, she would be leading a team into hostile territory to recover materials that could reshape global power balances. The pilots who'd called her a female trainee that morning had no idea that their dismissive comments would soon seem absurd in comparison to the reality of her actual responsibilities. The aircraft lifted off into darkness, disappearing into night skies that held secrets worth dying for. The stealth transport cut through mountain air at an altitude that made oxygen masks mandatory and conversation nearly impossible. Ghost reviewed the mission parameters one final time, her mind processing contingencies and failure points with the systematic precision of someone who'd learned that overlooking details could be fatal. The sealed envelope from General Castellanos remained unopened. Those kinds of orders were reserved for situations where standard protocols had completely broken down. Through her night vision goggles, the terrain below appeared as a landscape of shadows and geometric shapes, devoid of the human presence that existed in daylight hours. But Ghost knew that emptiness was an illusion. In valleys and hidden facilities scattered across these mountains, activities occurred that would never appear in official reports or historical records. She was returning to that world, trading the relative clarity of conventional military service for the moral ambiguity of necessary shadows. 15 minutes to insertion point, Phoenix's voice crackled through the intercom. Weather's deteriorating faster than forecast. Winds are gusting to 40 knots, and we've got cloud cover moving in that could complicate extraction. Ghost acknowledged the update while mentally adjusting mission parameters. Weather was a variable that couldn't be controlled, only adapted to, and successful operations required flexibility when conditions changed. Kozlov completed final equipment checks with practiced efficiency, ensuring that each team member's gear was secure and functional. In operations like this, equipment failure wasn't just inconvenient, it could compromise the entire mission and endanger team members' lives. Ghost, I've been thinking about the competing groups Castellanos mentioned. If multiple parties are converging on the same objective, we need to consider that someone leaked operational details. The implication hung in the air like cordite smoke. If their mission had been compromised before it began, they were walking into a situation where enemies might know their capabilities, timing, and objectives. Ghost had encountered betrayal before, had learned to operate under the assumption that operational security was always suspect until proven otherwise. We adjust our approach accordingly. Standard protocols assume compromised intelligence and plan for multiple contingencies. Santos looked up from his communications equipment, his expression troubled. I'm picking up encrypted radio traffic on frequencies that suggest military-grade coordination, multiple call signs, precise timing references, and what sounds like countdown procedures. He paused, fine-tuning his equipment. Ghost, whatever's happening down there, it's bigger than a simple convoy intercept. This feels like a full-scale operation with multiple participants. The aircraft's engines changed pitch as Phoenix began their descent toward the insertion point. Through reinforced windows, Ghost could see lights scattered across the valley floor, not the random pattern of civilian settlements, but the organized geometry of military installations and staging areas. What should have been an isolated intercept operation was beginning to resemble a convergence of forces that could escalate beyond anyone's control. 2 minutes to insertion, Phoenix announced. I'm seeing vehicle movements on multiple roads leading to the target area. Whatever's happening tonight, we're not the only ones interested in that convoy. Ghost felt the familiar pre-mission clarity settling over her mind, a mental state where extraneous thoughts disappeared and focus narrowed to mission-critical elements. Fear, doubt, and personal concerns became irrelevant in the face of operational necessity. As the aircraft descended toward terrain that would provide cover for their insertion, Ghost made command decisions based on rapidly changing tactical conditions. We moved to the secondary extraction point and established defensive positions. If Phoenix can't reach us, we hold until he can or until we can reach the tertiary site. She paused, scanning their backdrall through night vision. Mitchell, how much explosive ordnance do you have remaining? We might need to discourage pursuit more aggressively. The team's movement through mountainous terrain tested their physical conditioning and tactical discipline. Each team member carried specialized equipment that was essential for mission success, but added weight that became significant during extended operations. The wounded colonel's condition was stable but declining, while the researchers' academic fitness levels were being pushed beyond their limits by terrain that special operations personnel found challenging. Contact rear, Mitchell announced while engaging targets that had closed within effective range. I've got multiple personnel attempting to flank our position from the south. They're using professional tactics and coordinated fire and movement. His assessment was punctuated by controlled bursts of automatic weapons fire that forced pursuing teams to seek cover rather than advance. Kozlov's overwatch position provided early warning of developments that could affect their tactical situation. Ghost, I'm seeing vehicle lights on multiple access roads leading to this area. Whatever forces were promised as reinforcement are arriving ahead of schedule. The intelligence meant their window for extraction was closing faster than planned, and they might soon face overwhelming numerical disadvantage. The secondary extraction point was a natural clearing that provided helicopter landing capabilities, while offering defensive positions that could be held by a small team against larger forces. Ghost positioned her team to maximize their tactical advantages, while minimizing exposure to the pursuing groups that were now coordinating their approaches with increasing effectiveness. As they established defensive positions, Ghost opened the sealed envelope that General Castellanos had provided for emergency situations. The contents made her blood run cold, authorization codes for weapons release that could turn a covert recovery mission into something approaching a small war. The implications were clear. The materials they'd recovered were important enough to justify almost any level of violence to protect them. Phoenix's voice finally crackled through communications with news that both relieved and concerned the team. Ghost, I've resolved the mechanical issues, but we've got a bigger problem. Satellite imagery shows multiple aircraft inbound to your area, at least 3 helicopters with unknown intentions and capabilities. The development meant their extraction window was becoming a race against forces that could arrive with overwhelming firepower. Ghost realized that the mission's final phase would test not just their tactical skills, but their ability to complete objectives under conditions that bordered on conventional warfare. The morning that had started with squadron mockery seemed like a lifetime ago, replaced by reality, where national security hung in the balance and decisions carried consequences that could affect global power structures. The sound of approaching helicopter rotors announced that the mission's climax was about to begin, and Ghost prepared to prove that her reputation had been earned in situations exactly like this. The distinctive sound of rotor blades cutting through mountain air announced the arrival of multiple aircraft, their navigation lights visible against star-filled skies. Ghost positioned her team in defensive formations that maximized their limited firepower while providing multiple egress routes if the situation became untenable. Through night vision optics, she could identify at least 3 helicopters approaching from different directions, a coordinated effort that suggested professional military planning rather than opportunistic pursuit. Phoenix, what's your ETA? Ghost's transmission carried urgency that reflected their deteriorating tactical situation. Multiple hostile ground forces were converging on their position, while unknown aircraft were establishing what appeared to be an encirclement pattern. Their window for extraction was measured in minutes rather than hours, and those minutes were disappearing rapidly. Ghost, I'm 3 minutes out, but I'm seeing missile lock warnings from multiple sources. Someone down there has surface-to-air capabilities that weren't in the intelligence briefing. Phoenix's response confirmed Ghost's suspicions that this operation had escalated beyond original parameters. What had begun as a covert recovery mission was becoming a combat engagement with international implications. Mitchell's position provided tactical intelligence about the approaching helicopters. Ghost, the lead aircraft is military-grade with what looks like external weapon systems. The other 2 appear to be transport variants, possibly insertion platforms for additional personnel. His assessment was delivered while maintaining defensive fields of fire that discouraged ground forces from advancing too aggressively. Santos intercepted communications that provided insight into their opponent's intentions and capabilities. I'm picking up radio traffic in multiple languages, English, Russian, and what sounds like Mandarin. This isn't just one foreign intelligence service. We're dealing with a multinational effort to secure the package. The intelligence explained the level of coordination they were facing and the strategic importance of the materials they'd recovered. The wounded colonel's condition had stabilized enough for him to provide intelligence that changed Ghost's understanding of their situation. Captain, what you recovered isn't just research data. It's the complete specifications for quantum encryption systems that could render current intelligence gathering methods obsolete. Every major power's espionage capabilities would become worthless overnight. His explanation provided context for the international interest and the willingness to risk military confrontation. Kozlov's overwatch position came under direct fire as the first helicopter began engaging their defensive positions with precision that indicated professional military crew training. Taking fire from aerial platform, they know our positions and they're equipped for close air support operations. Her report was punctuated by the sound of rounds impacting terrain around their defensive positions. Ghost made tactical decisions that would determine the mission's outcome and potentially her team's survival. Phoenix, we need immediate extraction regardless of threats. Hostile forces are engaging with military-grade weapons, and we can't maintain this position much longer. She paused, calculating odds and alternatives. Mitchell, prepare charges to deny enemy access to our defensive positions. We're going to have to fight our way to the extraction point. The researcher, Dr. Webb's assistant, proved unexpectedly useful as he provided technical information about the recovered materials. The container has built-in destruction mechanisms that can be activated remotely. If capture becomes inevitable, the materials can be destroyed rather than compromised. His technical knowledge offered options that could prevent mission failure even if extraction became impossible. As Phoenix's stealth transport approached through hostile airspace, Ghost realized that the next few minutes would determine whether their mission ended in success or became an international incident with consequences that could reshape global intelligence operations. The female pilot who'd been dismissed as a trainee that morning was about to prove that her reputation had been forged in exactly these kinds of impossible situations. Phoenix's stealth transport materialized from darkness like a mechanical ghost, its angular surfaces rendering it nearly invisible until it was close enough to provide immediate support. The aircraft's approach was masked by terrain features that blocked radar detection, while its advanced stealth technology defeated most electronic surveillance systems. Ghost could see why Phoenix had earned his reputation. The approach required flying skills that bordered on the supernatural. 30 seconds to touchdown, Phoenix announced through communications that crackled with electromagnetic interference from hostile jamming efforts. I've got missile lock warnings from multiple sources, and my defensive systems are being painted by targeting radars. This is going to be fast and dangerous. His assessment was delivered with professional calm despite facing threats that could destroy his aircraft and eliminate their extraction option. The hostile helicopters responded to Phoenix's arrival by shifting from reconnaissance to active engagement, their weapons systems lighting up defensive positions with automatic weapons fire that forced Ghost's team to seek better cover. Kozlov returned fire with precision that spoke to years of combat experience, her rounds finding targets that were using darkness and rotor wash for concealment. Ghost, we've got ground forces advancing from multiple directions, Mitchell reported while engaging targets that were attempting to overrun their defensive perimeter. At least 20 personnel with military-grade equipment and professional tactical coordination. They're willing to take casualties to prevent our extraction. His assessment was punctuated by explosive charges that he'd placed to channel enemy movement into predetermined killing zones. Santos maintained communication security while monitoring hostile radio traffic that provided intelligence about enemy intentions and capabilities. They're coordinating a final assault timed with Phoenix's landing, multiple call signs, synchronized timing, and what sounds like air support coordination. The intelligence meant their extraction would occur under the most dangerous possible conditions. Ghost made command decisions that balanced mission objectives against team survival. We extract with the package immediately. Wounded personnel first, then the researcher, then team members by tactical necessity. She secured the recovered materials while preparing for movement under intense fire. Phoenix, we're coming to you. Maintain engines and be prepared for immediate departure. The extraction began under conditions that tested the limits of special operations training and aircraft capabilities. Team members moved through hostile fire while maintaining tactical discipline, their movements coordinated despite chaos that would paralyze less experienced personnel. The wounded colonel proved capable of rapid movement despite his injuries, while the researcher followed instructions with academic precision that served him well under combat conditions. Mitchell's rear guard action became crucial as hostile forces made their final push to prevent extraction. Ghost, I'm holding them as long as possible, but you need to get that package airborne immediately. His transmission was interrupted by explosive detonations that suggested he was using his remaining ordnance to maximum effect against overwhelming numerical odds. Kozlov provided overwatch fire that forced hostile helicopters to maintain distance rather than engaging at close range, her precision marksmanship creating tactical space that allowed the extraction to proceed. Hostile aircraft maintaining standoff distance, but they're coordinating for a synchronized assault. We have maybe 60 seconds before they overwhelm our defensive positions. As Ghost reached Phoenix's aircraft with the recovered materials, she realized that mission success depended on the next 30 seconds. The stealth transport's engines were spooled up for immediate departure, but extracting her entire team would require precise timing and the kind of tactical coordination that separated elite units from conventional forces. The morning's mockery seemed absurd compared to the reality of international combat operations, where decisions carried consequences measured in national security implications rather than personal pride. The stealth transport's cargo ramp lowered with hydraulic precision that spoke to engineering designed for combat operations in hostile environments. Ghost guided the wounded colonel and researcher aboard while maintaining situational awareness of threats that could materialize from multiple directions. Phoenix's aircraft represented sanctuary, but only if they could complete extraction before hostile forces could bring decisive firepower to bear on their position. Mitchell, Kozlov, fall back to extraction point immediately, Ghost commanded through tactical communications, while ensuring the recovered materials were secured against combat damage or loss. The container holding quantum encryption research was strapped into specialized mounting systems designed to protect sensitive materials during high-G maneuvering that might be necessary for survival. Mitchell's withdrawal from his defensive position required covering fire from Kozlov's overwatch location and suppressive fire from Ghost's position near the aircraft. Moving, 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 Mitchell reported while displacing under contact that tested his ability to move quickly while maintaining defensive capabilities. His tactical withdrawal was complicated by explosive charges that he'd placed to deny terrain to pursuing forces. Hostile forces recognized that their window for preventing extraction was closing rapidly, leading to increasingly aggressive tactics that bordered on desperation. Automatic weapons fire increased in volume and accuracy as multiple teams coordinated their final assault on the extraction point. Ghost could see muzzle flashes from positions that indicated professional military training rather than opportunistic pursuit. Phoenix, we need immediate departure as soon as Mitchell reaches the aircraft, Ghost transmitted while providing covering fire for her team's final movements. Hostile forces are committing to final assault, and our defensive position is becoming untenable. Her assessment was punctuated by rounds impacting the aircraft's armored surfaces with metallic impacts that indicated armor-piercing ammunition. Kozlov's final bounds to the extraction point were covered by suppressive fire that forced hostile helicopters to maintain standoff distances rather than engaging at close range. "Last man, last man, last man," she reported while reaching the aircraft's cargo ramp. Her successful extraction meant that mission objectives had been achieved despite overwhelming hostile opposition and international complications. Mitchell reached the aircraft as hostile forces began their final assault on the extraction point, his arrival marking the completion of personnel recovery under the most challenging possible conditions. "Package secure, team complete, ready for immediate departure," Ghost reported to Phoenix, while ensuring that all personnel were properly secured for what would undoubtedly be a combat departure under hostile fire. The stealth transport lifted off through a tactical environment that included surface-to-air missiles, hostile helicopters, and ground forces equipped with weapons capable of engaging aircraft. Phoenix's piloting skills became crucial as he maneuvered through threats that would challenge the most experienced combat pilots. The aircraft's stealth capabilities provided protection, but success required flying skills that pushed both aircraft and pilot to their operational limits. As they gained altitude and distance from the hostile engagement area, Ghost realized that mission success had been achieved through professional competence, tactical coordination, and the kind of teamwork that developed only through shared experience in similar circumstances. The quantum encryption materials were secure, her team was intact, and Phoenix was navigating them toward friendly airspace despite continued threats from hostile forces. Looking back at the valley, where multiple international forces continued engaging each other over materials they no longer possessed, Ghost understood that the mission's success would resonate far beyond the immediate tactical victory. The research they'd recovered could reshape global intelligence capabilities, and preventing its compromise had required exactly the kind of operation that her Black Project experience had prepared her to lead. The flight back to friendly territory provided time for Ghost to process the mission's implications and her own role in events that would never appear in official records. The female pilot who'd been dismissed as a trainee had just completed an operation that proved her capabilities extended far beyond conventional military aviation. Her clearances, experience, and leadership had been essential for mission success under conditions that tested the limits of special operations capabilities. The secure debriefing facility at Nellis Air Force Base hummed with activity as intelligence personnel processed materials that could reshape global strategic balances. Ghost sat across from General Castellanos in a room designed to prevent electronic surveillance, her mission report complete, except for details that would require additional security clearances to discuss. The quantum encryption research recovered from Compound 7 was already being analyzed by specialists whose existence was classified beyond most government officials' knowledge. Captain Varga, preliminary analysis suggests that you recovered materials worth more than the gross domestic product of most nations, General Castellanos stated, while reviewing reports that bore classification markings Ghost recognized from her Black Project days. Dr. Webb's research represents breakthroughs that could render current intelligence gathering methods obsolete within a decade. The general's assessment carried weight that extended beyond immediate tactical success. Colonel Rodriguez entered the debriefing room carrying updates that provided context for the mission's broader implications. Ghost, NSA analysis of intercepted communications, suggests that at least 4 different nations had advanced knowledge of the convoy operation. Someone with access to highly classified intelligence was coordinating international efforts to compromise our research. His report confirmed suspicions that the mission had been compromised from its inception. The wounded colonel from the convoy, now receiving medical treatment in facilities that officially didn't exist, had provided intelligence that explained the international interest in Compound 7's research. The quantum encryption systems represent a paradigm shift in information security, he'd reported during initial debriefing. Every current method of electronic intelligence gathering would become worthless overnight if this technology proliferated beyond American control. Ghost's team members underwent separate debriefings that would contribute to after-action reports classified so highly that their existence would be denied if questioned. Mitchell's explosive ordnance expertise had been crucial for mission success, while Kozlov's marksmanship had provided tactical superiority despite numerical disadvantage. Santos's communications intelligence had enabled tactical coordination that prevented mission failure under the most challenging conditions. Dr. Webb's assistant, the researcher they'd extracted along with the quantum encryption materials, proved to be a crucial intelligence source regarding Compound 7's compromise. Dr. Webb had expressed concerns about security breaches in the weeks before the facility went dark, he reported during intensive debriefing sessions. He suspected that someone with access to research data was providing intelligence to foreign governments. The researcher's testimony suggested that the facility's compromise had been an inside operation rather than external penetration. Phoenix's aircraft had sustained damage during the extraction that required specialized repair capabilities available only at facilities with appropriate security clearances. I counted at least 12 missile lock warnings during the extraction phase, he reported during his debrief. Without the aircraft's stealth capabilities and defensive systems, that mission would have ended very differently. His assessment highlighted the technological superiority that had enabled mission success, despite overwhelming hostile opposition. General Castellanos concluded the formal debriefing by addressing implications that extended beyond immediate tactical considerations. Captain, this mission's success prevented quantum encryption technology from falling into hostile hands, but it also exposed intelligence leaks that threaten ongoing operations worldwide. She paused, studying classification stamps that indicated information requiring presidential-level clearances. Your performance under these conditions confirms assessments that led to your original Black Project assignments. As Ghost prepared to leave the debriefing facility, she understood that the mission's completion marked a transition rather than an ending. The quantum encryption materials were secure, but the intelligence leaks that had compromised Compound 7 remained active threats requiring continued investigation. Her role in protecting national security interests would continue, but now with recognition that her capabilities extended far beyond what conventional military evaluation could measure. The drive back to the main base provided time for reflection on a mission that had tested every aspect of her training and experience. The morning's mockery from squadron members seemed absurd compared to the reality of operations, where national security hung in the balance and decisions carried consequences that could reshape global power structures. The squadron-ready room felt different when Ghost entered the following morning, though the physical space remained unchanged. The same coffee-stained tables, the same mission boards covered with training schedules, the same collection of pilots who measured success in flight hours and landing scores rather than classified operations that shaped global security. But something fundamental had shifted in ways that wouldn't become apparent until later in the day. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, the golden boy who'd patronized her the previous morning, looked up from his flight planning with the same condescending smile that had become his trademark. Well, if it isn't our female trainee. How was your mysterious disappearance yesterday? Special training for girls who can't handle real missions. His comment drew chuckles from other pilots who remained unaware of what had transpired in mountains where officially nothing had happened. Ghost poured coffee with movements that betrayed nothing of the previous night's activities, her demeanor calm despite carrying secrets that weighed more than most people's entire careers. Just completing some additional qualifications, sir. Nothing that would interest conventional pilots. Her response was measured, professional, and completely inadequate to convey the reality of operations that tested the limits of human capability under conditions that redefined the concept of hostile environment. Captain Danny, Maverick Stone, a pilot whose enthusiasm exceeded his tactical judgment, joined Harrison's mockery with comments that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of military hierarchy and operational security. Come on, Ghost. We all know the Air Force has special programs to help female pilots feel included. Nothing wrong with needing extra training to keep up with the real operators. His comment was delivered with smugness that would have been amusing if it weren't so ignorant of actual reality. The squadron's newest pilot, Second Lieutenant Maria Falcon Santos, watched the exchange with interest that suggested she understood undercurrents that others missed. Unlike the senior pilots, she'd noticed Ghost's absence during a period when other squadron activities had proceeded normally, and she'd observed subtle changes in base security posture that indicated significant operations had occurred nearby. Her silence suggested intelligence that others lacked. Ghost's phone buzzed with a text message that appeared routine but carried coded language indicating classified communication requirements. Ghost, report to Wing Commander's office immediately for mission debrief and recognition ceremony. The message was signed with initials that identified Colonel Rodriguez, but the formal language suggested something more significant than routine administrative requirements. As Ghost prepared to leave the ready room, Harrison's voice followed her with continued mockery that demonstrated his complete ignorance of her actual qualifications and recent activities. Don't forget to tell us all about your special training when you get back. We're always interested in hearing about programs designed to help people who aren't quite ready for real military aviation. His laughter was joined by others who shared his assumptions about gender and capability in military aviation. Ghost paused at the ready room door, her hand on the handle, as she considered responses that would end Harrison's mockery immediately and permanently. She possessed security clearances that outranked most generals, had completed missions that influenced global strategic balances, and carried decorations for valor that exceeded anything Harrison would achieve in a full career. But operational security requirements meant that her actual capabilities would remain hidden behind cover stories and administrative deception. "Enjoy your training flights, sir," Ghost replied with professional courtesy that masked her knowledge of Harrison's limitations and her own capabilities. "Some of us have more important obligations to fulfill." Her response was delivered without emotion, but those who knew her well would have recognized the dangerous calm that preceded her most effective responses to underestimation and disrespect. As she left the ready room, Ghost reflected on the irony that pilots who considered themselves elite operators had no understanding of actual elite operations or the personnel who conducted them successfully under conditions they couldn't imagine. The contrast between perception and reality would soon become apparent, though in ways that none of them expected. The wing commander's office occupied corner space in the base's administrative complex, its windows providing views of flight lines, where conventional training operations proceeded according to schedules that bore no relationship to classified activities occurring in parallel dimensions of military reality. Ghost entered to find an assembly that indicated something far more significant than routine administrative business was about to occur. General Castellano stood beside Colonel Rodriguez, her presence lending gravity to proceedings that officially weren't happening. Wing Commander Brigadier General Patricia Steele Morrison commanded attention despite her relatively small stature, her reputation forged through combat operations that had shaped military aviation doctrine for the past 2 decades. The collection of senior officers suggested recognition that transcended normal squadron-level awards and commendations. "Captain Varga, please stand at attention," General Morrison commanded with voice that carried authority earned through decades of leadership in the most challenging operational environments. Ghost complied with military precision, while nodding additional personnel who hadn't been present during previous briefings, representatives from intelligence agencies, whose existence was acknowledged only within specific security clearance levels. General Castellano stepped forward carrying a presentation case that bore security markings, indicating contents that required presidential-level authorization for disclosure. "Captain Varga, based on your performance during Operation Nightfall and subsequent classified activities, you are hereby awarded the Intelligence Star for extraordinary heroism in intelligence operations of vital importance to national security." The decoration was one that fewer than 50 people had received in the past decade, its existence known only within the intelligence community. Colonel Rodriguez added context that explained the significance of recognition that could never be publicly acknowledged. "Captain, your actions during the past 48 hours prevented quantum encryption technology from falling into hostile hands and preserved American technological superiority in communications security." His statement was delivered with solemnity that reflected national security implications, extending far beyond immediate tactical success. The Intelligence Star was pinned to Ghost's uniform by General Morrison, the ceremony conducted with military precision, despite its classification level preventing public recognition or media coverage. "Captain Varga, this decoration recognizes performance under the most challenging possible conditions, where mission failure could have compromised national security interests for decades to come." The general's words carried weight that extended beyond personal recognition to acknowledge strategic implications. An intelligence representative, whose identification was limited to first name and agency initials, provided additional context for Ghost's recent mission and its broader significance. Captain, analysis of recovered materials confirms that Dr. Webb's research represented breakthroughs that could have rendered current intelligence gathering methods obsolete within 5 years if it had been compromised. His assessment explained the international interest and the willingness to risk military confrontation. General Castellanos concluded the ceremony by addressing Ghost's future assignments and continued role in operations that would never appear in official records. Captain, your unique combination of aviation skills, intelligence clearances, and operational experience makes you invaluable for missions that require capabilities beyond conventional military resources. She paused, studying classification markings that indicated information requiring special handling. Your cover assignment with the training squadron will continue, but you should expect additional tasking that utilizes your actual qualifications. As the ceremony concluded and personnel dispersed according to security protocols that prevented unauthorized disclosure, Ghost understood that her role had fundamentally changed despite external appearances remaining constant. The female pilot who'd been mocked as a trainee now carried decorations that recognized her as one of the military's most capable operators in classified activities that shaped global strategic balances. The walk back to the squadron area provided time for Ghost to process recognition that validated years of training and sacrifice, while acknowledging capabilities that would remain hidden from most of her colleagues. The contrast between public perception and classified reality would continue, but now with formal acknowledgement of her actual contributions to national security operations. The afternoon training schedule proceeded normally, as Ghost returned to squadron activities that seemed mundane compared to recent operations involving international conflict and quantum encryption technology. But she understood that maintaining cover required continued participation in conventional military aviation, despite her actual qualifications, transcending anything the training squadron could provide. The squadron briefing room buzzed with pre-flight activity as pilots prepared for afternoon training missions that would test their basic aviation skills against scenarios designed for conventional military operations. Ghost reviewed flight plans with the same attention to detail that had characterized her approach to classified missions, understanding that professional competence required excellence regardless of operational complexity or security classification. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison continued his pattern of patronizing comments that revealed his ignorance of Ghost's actual qualifications and recent activities. "Ghost, try to keep up with the formation today. We're flying basic tactical scenarios, but I know that can be challenging for pilots who need special accommodation." His tone carried condescension that would have been amusing if it weren't so completely disconnected from reality. Captain Stone joined Harrison's mockery with enthusiasm that demonstrated his fundamental misunderstanding of military hierarchy and operational capability. "Don't worry, Ghost. We'll make sure to fly slowly enough that you can maintain visual contact. Can't have our female trainee getting lost during basic formation flying." His comment drew laughter from pilots who shared assumptions about gender and capability in military aviation. Ghost acknowledged their comments with professional courtesy, while internally calculating the irony that pilots who considered themselves competent had never operated under conditions that tested actual elite capability. "I'll do my best to maintain formation integrity, sir," she replied with tone that revealed nothing of her knowledge that their advanced training scenarios were elementary compared to operations she'd completed successfully under hostile fire. Second Lieutenant Santos observed the exchange with interest that suggested she understood undercurrents that others missed. Unlike senior pilots who measured capability through conventional metrics, she'd noticed subtle indicators that Ghost's qualifications extended beyond standard aviation training. Her silence suggested recognition that assumptions about gender and capability might be fundamentally flawed. The mission briefing proceeded according to standard protocols that seemed routine compared to briefings involving national security implications and international conflict scenarios. Ghost listened to tactical discussions that covered basic fighter aviation, while remembering briefings where operational failure could compromise global strategic balances and reshape international power structures. As pilots prepared for engine start and taxi procedures, Ghost's phone received another coded message indicating continued classified communication requirements. Ghost, expect additional tasking within 72 hours. Maintain current cover assignment while preparing for operations requiring your unique qualifications. The message confirmed that her role in protecting national security interests would continue despite external appearances suggesting routine training activities. Flight line operations proceeded with mechanical precision, as aircraft were prepared for missions that would test pilot capability against scenarios designed for conventional military aviation. Ghost completed pre-flight inspections with attention to detail that reflected training, extending far beyond standard pilot qualifications. Her movements efficient despite equipment limitations compared to aircraft used in classified operations. Engine start and taxi procedures provided routine comfort compared to recent operations involving stealth aircraft and hostile engagement scenarios. Ghost's F-16 represented proven technology that had served military aviation for decades, its capabilities well documented and thoroughly tested through conventional operations worldwide. The contrast with specialized aircraft used in black project operations was significant but manageable. As the formation taxied toward the active runway, Ghost reflected on the irony that pilots who questioned her qualifications were about to witness flying skills developed through operations they couldn't imagine and wouldn't believe if described. The afternoon's training mission would provide opportunities to demonstrate capabilities while maintaining cover that protected operational security requirements. The radio crackled with tower communications that seemed routine compared to encrypted tactical nets used during classified operations. But Ghost maintained professional protocols that ensured flight safety and mission success, regardless of operational complexity or security classification. Tower clearance for takeoff marked the beginning of a training mission that would inadvertently become a demonstration of capabilities that transcended conventional pilot qualification standards. Ghost's F-16 lifted off with precision that reflected training, extending far beyond basic military aviation. Her control input smooth despite equipment limitations compared to advanced aircraft used in special operations. Formation join-up proceeded according to standard procedures, as Ghost positioned her aircraft relative to Harrison's lead fighter. The lieutenant colonel's flying was competent but unremarkable, his technique adequate for conventional operations, but lacking the precision that characterized pilots who'd operated under conditions where minor errors could prove fatal. Ghost maintained formation position with ease that made the maneuver appear effortless. Ghost, tighten up your formation position. Harrison's voice carried patronizing tone through radio communications that were monitored by multiple agencies for security purposes. I know formation flying can be challenging, but try to maintain professional standards. His comment revealed ignorance of Ghost's actual qualifications, while providing entertainment for pilots who shared his assumptions about gender and capability. Ghost adjusted her aircraft position with precision that demonstrated flying skills developed through operations requiring perfection under conditions that tested human capability beyond normal limits. Her formation position became geometrically perfect, maintained with control inputs so subtle that her aircraft appeared locked in space relative to Harrison's fighter. The demonstration was lost on pilots who lacked experience necessary to recognize exceptional capability. The training scenario began with basic fighter maneuvers designed to test pilot competence under simulated combat conditions. Ghost followed Harrison through standard tactical formations, while mentally noting tactical errors that would prove fatal under actual combat conditions. His situational awareness was adequate for training scenarios, but insufficient for operations where hostile forces possessed capabilities beyond basic fighter aviation. Bandits, 12 o'clock high, 20 miles. The exercise controller announced through radio communications that simulated threat scenarios based on conventional warfare assumptions. Ghost immediately identified tactical opportunities that Harrison missed, her combat experience enabling recognition of advantages that could be exploited through superior positioning and timing. Harrison's response to the simulated threat was textbook correct but predictable, his tactical decisions following conventional doctrine without adaptation for specific circumstances or enemy capabilities. Ghost maintained wingman position while preparing for maneuvers that would demonstrate capabilities exceeding anything expected from female trainees or conventional pilot training programs. The engagement developed according to predetermined parameters as opposing aircraft maneuvered for tactical advantage within constraints designed to ensure training safety. Ghost observed Harrison's technique with professional interest, noting strengths and weaknesses that would determine success or failure under actual combat conditions, where enemy pilots possessed training and equipment comparable to American standards. Ghost, stay in formation and follow my lead, Harrison transmitted with confidence that reflected his assumption of superior capability and experience. This might get intense, so don't feel bad if you can't keep up with advanced tactical maneuvering. His patronizing tone was preserved for posterity through radio recordings that would soon provide ironic contrast to actual performance under challenging conditions. Ghost acknowledged the transmission while preparing to demonstrate flying skills that would fundamentally alter squadron perceptions of her capabilities and qualifications. The afternoon training mission was about to become something that none of them had expected, transforming assumptions about gender and competence through performance that couldn't be dismissed or explained away through conventional evaluation criteria. The tactical engagement intensified as Harrison attempted maneuvers that he considered advanced but Ghost recognized as fundamental techniques from her classified training. His aircraft pulled through a climbing turn that was intended to demonstrate superior piloting skills, but actually revealed limitations in both technique and tactical understanding. Ghost followed with precision that made the complex maneuver appear effortless, while positioning herself for responses that Harrison couldn't anticipate. Not bad, Ghost. Harrison's transmission carried surprised approval through radio frequencies monitored by range control and recorded for training analysis. You're keeping up better than I expected for someone with your background. His comment revealed assumptions about female pilots while acknowledging performance that exceeded his preconceived limitations. The exercise controller introduced additional complexity designed to test pilot capability under pressure that simulated combat conditions. Multiple bandits, various altitudes, engage as opportunities present. Ghost immediately recognized tactical possibilities that emerged from the scenario's development, her combat experience enabling identification of advantages that conventional training rarely addressed. Harrison's response was competent but predictable, his tactical decisions following standard doctrine without creative adaptation for changing circumstances. Ghost maintained formation position while calculating maneuvers that would demonstrate capabilities developed through operations where innovative thinking meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Ghost, I'm going to show you some advanced maneuvering, Harrison announced with confidence that was about to be fundamentally challenged. Try to follow along, but don't push your aircraft beyond your capability limits. His patronizing tone was preserved through radio recordings that would provide ironic historical context for what followed. Harrison initiated a complex defensive maneuver that was intended to demonstrate superior flying skills, but actually provided Ghost with opportunities to showcase capabilities that transcended conventional pilot training. Her response was immediate and precise, her aircraft flowing through maneuvers that combined textbook technique with innovations developed through operations requiring perfection under lethal conditions. The formation dissolved as both aircraft engaged in individual maneuvering that tested the limits of pilot capability and aircraft performance. Ghost's technique became increasingly evident as she demonstrated control that seemed to defy aerodynamic limitations, her aircraft responding to inputs with precision that reflected training, extending far beyond standard military aviation programs. Jesus Christ! Captain Stone's voice crackled through radio communications as he observed maneuvering that challenged his understanding of what was possible in conventional fighter aircraft. Ghost, where the hell did you learn to fly like that? His question reflected growing recognition that assumptions about female pilots might be fundamentally flawed. Harrison's flying became increasingly aggressive as he attempted to maintain superiority through maneuvers that tested his aircraft's capabilities and his own skill limitations. But Ghost matched and exceeded his performance with apparent ease, her technique demonstrating mastery that could only be developed through experience in operational environments beyond conventional military aviation. The exercise controller's voice reflected growing interest in performance that exceeded normal training parameters. All aircraft maintain safety protocols while continuing current exercise. The transmission suggested that Ghost's demonstration was being observed by personnel whose interest extended beyond routine training evaluation. As the engagement continued, Ghost began revealing capabilities that would fundamentally alter squadron perceptions and challenge assumptions about gender, training, and operational competence in military aviation. The afternoon that had started with patronizing mockery was becoming a demonstration that would be remembered long after the immediate participants had forgotten their preconceived notions about female pilots and advanced tactical capability. The tactical engagement reached its climax as Ghost executed a maneuver that left Harrison and the other observing pilots speechless. Her F-16 seemed to defy physics as she transitioned from defensive positioning to offensive advantage through a combination of techniques that weren't taught in any conventional training program. The aircraft's flight path traced impossible geometries through three-dimensional space, demonstrating control that approached the theoretical limits of human capability. What the actual fuck was that? Captain Stone's transmission violated radio discipline, but captured the sentiment of pilots who just witnessed flying that challenged their understanding of what was possible. Ghost's maneuver had been executed with precision that suggested capabilities developed through training that transcended anything available through conventional military aviation programs. Harrison's response was notably absent as his aircraft struggled to counter Ghost's positioning advantage. The lieutenant colonel who'd been patronizing her abilities found himself outmaneuvered by techniques that exceeded his experience and training. His silence spoke volumes about the fundamental shift in power dynamics that was occurring within the squadron's hierarchy. Range Control's voice carried new respect through radio communications. Outstanding demonstration of advanced tactical maneuvering. All aircraft maintain current exercise parameters while safety personnel evaluate performance characteristics. The transmission suggested that Ghost's capabilities were being assessed by personnel whose interest extended beyond routine training evaluation. Second Lieutenant Santos's observation proved prescient. I don't think Ghost needed our advanced training program. Her comment carried recognition that assumptions about female pilots and capability had been fundamentally challenged through performance that couldn't be dismissed or explained through conventional evaluation criteria. The exercise controller introduced final scenario elements designed to test pilot capability under maximum stress conditions. Multiple threats, low fuel state, weather deteriorating. Execute tactical withdrawal to home base while maintaining formation integrity. Ghost immediately recognized opportunities to demonstrate leadership capabilities that complemented her superior flying skills. "Harrison, recommend you follow my lead for the withdrawal," Ghost transmitted with professional courtesy that masked her recognition of his tactical limitations. "I have experience with complex navigation under challenging conditions." Her offer was diplomatic but firm, establishing new command relationships based on demonstrated competence rather than assumed hierarchy. Harrison's acceptance was grudging but realistic. "Ghost, take the lead. I'll follow your navigation." His transmission marked a fundamental shift in squadron dynamics as the pilot who'd been mocking her capabilities acknowledged superior performance that couldn't be denied or rationalized away through preconceived assumptions about gender and training. The formation withdrawal proceeded under Ghost's leadership with precision that impressed range controllers and a decision that would define the mission's character. Rather than following predetermined plans that might have been compromised, they would adapt to conditions on the ground and pursue objectives based on real-time intelligence. It was a more dangerous approach, but sometimes survival required abandoning safety in favor of unpredictability. The aircraft touched down in a clearing that existed on no official maps, and Ghost stepped into darkness that held secrets worth fighting for. The insertion point was a windswept plateau that provided natural concealment while offering multiple egress routes, terrain that special operations teams favored for its tactical advantages. Ghost's boots touched ground that felt solid after hours of flight, but she knew that sense of stability was temporary. Within minutes, they would be moving through hostile territory where every shadow could conceal threats and every decision carried life-or-death consequences. Team members dispersed according to predetermined patterns, establishing security while conducting equipment checks that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Kozlov took point, her movements silent despite carrying enough equipment to outfit a small military unit. Mitchell secured their perimeter while Santos established communications links that would allow coordination with overhead assets and command elements. "Ghost, we've got multiple heat signatures moving through the valley," Santos reported through encrypted communications. "At least 3 separate groups, all converging on the convoy route. ETA to intercept points suggests coordinated timing rather than coincidental movement." The intelligence confirmed Ghost's suspicions. They were walking into a situation where multiple players had stakes in the outcome, and not all of them shared American interests. Ghost activated her night vision system and began moving toward the valley floor, following terrain features that provided concealment while maintaining situational awareness. The technology strapped to her body represented decades of development and millions of dollars in research, but it was her training and experience that would determine mission success. Equipment failed, plans changed, and technology had limitations, but competence and adaptability were constants that could overcome most obstacles. The convoy route appeared through night vision as a ribbon of infrared signatures cutting through landscape that seemed designed for ambushes. Ghost could see why intelligence had identified this location as the optimal intercept point. It was a natural choke point where vehicles would be forced to slow down while navigating terrain that limited their options. It was also a killing ground where superior firepower and positioning could overcome numerical disadvantages. "Movement 2 o'clock, Kozlov's voice whispered through Ghost's earpiece. "Multiple personnel, military-grade equipment, establishing positions along the high ground." Ghost adjusted her scope and confirmed the sighting. At least 6 individuals wearing equipment that suggested professional military training rather than opportunistic criminals. These weren't amateurs seeking easy targets. They were professionals with specific objectives and the capabilities to achieve them. Mitchell's voice joined the tactical net. "I've got eyes on a second group, approximately 800 meters north of our position. They're setting up what looks like heavy weapons positions, definitely not here for simple theft." The situation was evolving into something more complex than intelligence had predicted, transforming a focused intercept mission into a multi-sided engagement where identifying enemies and allies would be challenging. Ghost made command decisions based on incomplete information, a skill that separated effective leaders from those who needed perfect intelligence before acting. We maintain our primary objective but adjust tactics based on developing conditions. Santos, can you monitor communications from the other groups? I need to understand their intentions and capabilities. She paused, scanning the valley through her scope. Mitchell, identify fallback positions in case we need to disengage quickly. Kozlov, maintain overwatch and be prepared to provide covering fire. The convoy's approach was announced by engine noise that carried clearly through mountain air. Ghost could see headlights moving along winding roads, their steady progress suggesting drivers who were confident in their security arrangements. What they didn't know was that multiple groups of professionals were waiting in darkness, each with objectives that might require violence to achieve. As the lead vehicle entered the kill zone, Ghost realized that whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine not just mission success, but potentially the balance of power in conflicts that spanned continents. The first vehicle rounded the bend with headlights cutting through darkness like searchlights seeking hidden threats. Ghost watched through her scope as the convoy maintained steady speed, their security apparently unaware of the multiple groups positioned along the route. The lead vehicle was a modified SUV with reinforced plating and run-flat tires, serious protection that suggested valuable cargo and professional security teams. Ghost, I'm intercepting radio traffic from the convoy, Santos whispered through encrypted communications. They're using military frequencies and reporting positions to what sounds like a command element. These aren't just security contractors, they're coordinated with higher authority. The intelligence added another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. Professional security meant trained responses to ambush scenarios and communication links that could bring additional support. Kozlov's position provided overwatch of the entire valley, her scope tracking movement from multiple groups now positioning for engagement. I count at least 15 personnel from the other groups, plus convoy security. We're outnumbered, but we have superior positioning and the element of surprise. She paused, adjusting her scope. Ghost, the second vehicle in the convoy is different. Heavier armor, specialized equipment mounted on the roof. That's probably our package. Ghost processed tactical information while calculating engagement options. The mission's primary objective was recovering materials from Compound 7, but the presence of multiple competing groups suggested that violence was inevitable. Success would require precise timing, superior tactics, and the kind of decision-making under pressure that separated elite operators from conventional forces. The convoy's speed began decreasing as they approached the narrowest section of the canyon, the natural choke point where ambush scenarios became most effective. Ghost could see muzzle flashes beginning to appear from positions along the high ground as other groups initiated contact with convoy security. The night erupted into controlled chaos as professional military personnel engaged in combat that would never appear in official reports. Contact, contact, contact. Kozlov's voice carried the controlled urgency of someone reporting enemy engagement while maintaining tactical discipline. Multiple groups engaging the convoy from positions along the ridge line. Heavy weapons fire, organized assault patterns. Ghost could see tracer rounds cutting through darkness like deadly meteors, their paths revealing firing positions and target areas. Mitchell's expertise became crucial as the engagement intensified. Ghost, I can disable the second vehicle without destroying the cargo, but we need to move fast. Other groups are advancing on foot, and convoy security is establishing defensive positions. The combat engineer's assessment was delivered with professional calm despite bullets impacting nearby terrain features. Ghost made the command decision that would define the mission's outcome. Execute, execute, execute. Mitchell, disable the target vehicle. Santos, maintain communications security and monitor for additional threats. Kozlov, provide overwatch and engage targets of opportunity. She paused, chambering a round in her weapon. We go in fast, secure the package, and extract before the situation deteriorates further. The explosive charges Mitchell had placed detonated with precision that spoke to years of experience and training. The convoy's second vehicle was disabled but not destroyed, its occupants stunned but alive. Ghost and her team moved through darkness with the coordinated efficiency of professionals who'd operated together in similar circumstances, their movements synchronized despite the chaos surrounding them. As they reached the disabled vehicle, Ghost realized that the real mission was just beginning. Inside the armored compartment lay secrets that could reshape global power balances, and multiple groups of trained killers were willing to die to possess them. The disabled vehicle's armored doors had been warped by Mitchell's precisely placed charges, creating an opening large enough for entry but small enough to provide defensive positions for anyone inside. Ghost approached with the systematic caution of someone who'd learned that overconfidence was often fatal in combat situations. Through the smoke and debris, she could see movement inside the vehicle, survivors who might be security personnel or researchers from Compound 7. Movement inside the target vehicle, Ghost reported through tactical communications. At least 2 personnel, status unknown. She gestured for Kozlov to provide covering fire while Mitchell prepared breaching charges for final entry. The sounds of combat from other positions in the valley provided constant background noise, reminding them that multiple groups were still engaged in firefights that could spread to their location. Santos, monitoring communications from his position, reported developments that complicated their tactical situation. Ghost, I'm intercepting transmissions suggesting that additional forces are en route to this location. ETA approximately 20 minutes for what sounds like air support or ground reinforcement. The intelligence meant their window for completing the mission and extracting was shrinking rapidly. Ghost made entry into the vehicle with weapon ready and senses heightened to combat levels. Inside, she found 2 individuals who bore no resemblance to typical security contractors. One was clearly a researcher based on his civilian clothing and obvious terror, while the other appeared to be military personnel who'd been injured in the explosive breach. Between them, secured in a specialized container, was what they'd come to recover. Package identified, Ghost reported while securing the container that held materials from Compound 7. The case was smaller than expected, but constructed with the kind of protection reserved for items whose loss could compromise national security. Whatever Dr. Webb had been working on was contained within military-grade shielding, designed to prevent tampering or unauthorized access. The injured military personnel proved to be a colonel whose identification showed clearances that rivaled Ghost's own Black Project credentials. "Captain, you don't understand what you're dealing with," he said through obvious pain. "That container holds research that 3 different nations are willing to start wars to obtain, if it falls into the wrong hands." He left the implication unfinished, but Ghost understood the stakes. Mitchell's voice interrupted through communications. "Ghost, we've got movement from multiple directions. The other groups have realized we've secured the package, and they're converging on our position." Through the vehicle's damaged windows, Ghost could see muzzle flashes getting closer as competing teams abandoned their engagement with convoy security and focused on recovering the materials that had become the mission's center of gravity. Kozlov's overwatch position provided tactical updates. At least 12 personnel moving toward your position from 3 different directions. They're coordinating their approach. These aren't opportunistic thieves. They're professionals with specific objectives. The assessment confirmed Ghost's suspicions that this was an operation with international implications rather than simple theft or terrorism. Ghost made decisions that would define the mission's final phase. "We extract with the package immediately. Mitchell, prepare explosive charges to deny the vehicle to enemy forces. Santos, contact Phoenix for emergency extraction." She secured the container while helping the injured researcher and wounded colonel prepare for movement under combat conditions. As they prepared to leave the disabled vehicle, Ghost realized that recovering the package was only the beginning of their challenges. Getting it safely back to American control would require traversing hostile territory while being pursued by multiple groups of trained killers who understood the strategic value of what they'd lost. The extract began under conditions that tested the limits of special operations training. Extraction under fire required coordinated movement across terrain that offered minimal concealment while being pursued by multiple hostile groups. Ghost led the team through darkness that was punctuated by muzzle flashes and the distinct crack of rounds passing close enough to be personal. The injured colonel proved capable of movement despite his wounds, while the researcher struggled with terrain that would challenge experienced hikers under ideal conditions. Phoenix, this is Ghost. We need immediate extraction at the primary LZ. Multiple hostile contacts, package secured, wounded personnel requiring medical attention. Ghost's transmission was answered by static. Either their communications were being jammed or Phoenix was operating under conditions that prevented immediate response. Either possibility meant they were on their own until circumstances changed. Mitchell's rear guard position provided updates on their pursuers' capabilities and intentions. Ghost, I count at least 3 separate groups in pursuit. They're not coordinating with each other, which is working in our favor, but they all have night vision and military-grade weapons. He paused to engage targets that were advancing too aggressively. The good news is they're more interested in the package than in eliminating us. The bad news is that won't last long if we can't maintain distance. Kozlov's tactical expertise became crucial as she identified routes that provided concealment while avoiding natural choke points where superior numbers could become decisive. Movement to the northeast, following the ridgeline toward the secondary extraction point. Terrain provides cover, but it's going to be physically demanding with wounded personnel. Her assessment was delivered while engaging targets that were attempting to flank their position. The researcher, Dr. Marcus Webb's assistant according to his identification, proved more resilient than his academic appearance suggested. The materials in that container, he gasped while navigating difficult terrain, represent breakthroughs in quantum encryption that could make current intelligence gathering methods obsolete. Every major power has been trying to penetrate Compound 7's research for years. His explanation provided context for the level of international interest they were encountering. Santos reestablished communications with Phoenix as they reached higher ground that offered better signal propagation. Ghost, Phoenix reports mechanical issues that are preventing immediate extraction. He's working the problem, but we might need to consider the secondary extraction point. The news meant their tactical situation was deteriorating. Longer exposure to pursuit, more opportunities for hostile forces to coordinate, and increased likelihood of additional enemy reinforcements arriving. Ghost made